Last point I wanted to bring up is accessible language, which is the other side of the same coin, making the textual elements of your post marketing materials and web pages useful and understandable. Why? There's no downside. Everyone wins. This is especially important for neurodivergent people, which is a term that can be used to describe folks with mental health disorders and cognitive dysfunction. And it can also be very important for people with mobility limitations or other disabilities who are seeking information about things. So this might look like including accessibility information for your events in the caption, letting people know if there are ramps, if there will be flashing lights, etc. This requires another presentation about what accessible events look like, so I'll just leave it there for now. But feel free to educate yourself on that on your own time. Content warnings. I am such a huge advocate of content warnings, such as gun violence, alcohol abuse. I know some people get really like, but how do I know if I've covered everything? There's so many things. There are a lot of things that are pretty standard. Violence, drug use, mental health disorders, death. There are some pretty obvious ones, but you might find that if you're interacting with a certain group of people often enough, you start to learn things that they need content warnings for. Like, for instance, I happen to have kynophobia, which is an irrational fear of dogs. And I appreciate being told about dogs barking because that is a thing for me that makes me feel very bad inside and can be a trigger for me. And I have friends who know that I'm afraid of dogs and will let me know, like, hey, picture of a dog on the next slide, or I'm posting, there will be dog barking in the captions, stuff like that. But you can't cover every base. So all you can do is do your best. Avoid ableist language. These are some examples of words you should not use, and I will share a few more comprehensive lists on future slides. Don't be offensive. It's a pretty basic ground rule. Clickable links in caption. Again, reiterating that to include your links not just in your image. Use emojis instead of emoticons and try to reserve them for the end. Screen readers are able to process emojis. Every emoji automatically has like an alt text with it that screen readers can process, whereas emoticons don't form a clear visual picture when the screen reader tries to read them. It's just a series of symbols. So you want to put your emojis towards the end so that a screen reader doesn't get bogged down with like purple heart, purple heart, purple heart, purple heart, purple heart, and use them in moderation. Don't cover your captions, your post captions in emojis so that screen readers have to repeat the same emoji thousands of times, and don't use emojis as part of your social media name. Don't use alternative characters from external sites to make copy appear in different styles, weights, and typefaces. It's really cool when we can see cursive in an Instagram caption because I'm like, wow, how'd they do that? It looks so fancy. But screen readers actually can't translate that at all. And ultimately, I feel like it's too much work to try and like make your copy look fancy. I feel like the typeface that it's in for Instagram already is quite readable, and I like it the way that it is. But that is an opinion by Socks Whitmore. Capitalize each word in your hashtag. As you saw in some of my post screenshots from my own Instagram earlier, you want to capitalize each word like this. So hashtag girls like us, capital G, capital L, capital U will help the screen readers know where words start and end. Here's an example of doing it for something that is an acronym as well. Avoid forced formatting. So if you've ever seen a tweet try to use tabs or spaces to create artificial columns where it makes it look like there's two separate vertical sections of text, screen readers cannot perceive that and will read your text from left to right, and it will sound very garbled. Be conscientious of your use of zero punctuation and run-on sentences, as well as studly/varied case. So that's what varied case means. If you've ever seen a meme that uses a mix of lowercase and capital letters throughout the word, as well as occasionally subbing in some numbers, screen readers can't make sense of that. It breaks them a little bit. And then zero punctuation run-on sentences, screen readers will just run on. And so you want to use punctuation and spacing and clear case so that everything, clear case, so that everything is read properly by the screen reader. Use spacing and headings/subheadings for clear, easy to read separation. Like I mentioned earlier, using those 3 dots makes me feel good inside because it looks nice and I can read it and it doesn't feel crowded. Avoid walls of text. Use short sentences and bullet points. That makes it easy both for people whose eyes need a little aid as well as whose brains need a little aid. This is really accessible for neurodivergent audiences. Keep your word choices simple, avoid extended vocabulary, just be concise and conversational. That's how you reach the most audiences, and it's a really good brand voice to have. So here's some visual examples of some of the things we've talked about. Some content warnings. This post contains graphic content. Content advisory. This might be triggering. Usually the best way is to say content warning, thing, and then list the things that are in your content that could be triggering to audiences. Breaking down ableist language. Here are some examples of words that you should try and sub out for more, it's just more accessible, more friendly alternatives. So confined to a wheelchair as opposed to wheelchair user. I am working myself on taking the word crazy and tone deaf. Phrases like that have been ingrained in our language for a very long time. And it can take effort to stop using them verbally, but it's kind of easy to look over a written description you're about to put on the internet and be like, hey, does this use any words that aren't friendly to every audience I have? And think about ways that you can sub them out. I also have a use this, not that graphic over here, which I will note I had to recolor because I pulled it from the internet. None of these images are mine. I had to recolor it to make it accessible because the previous colors were not very readable. So you can see some more substitutions for the words crazy, stupid, dumb, lame, handy, capable, things like that. A lot of these terms come from a place of ableism, and over the long term, you can work towards shifting your language to use these more friendly terms. An example of how to use heading and subheadings, this is especially when it comes to putting text in visuals, I feel like, because this doesn't apply to most actual post captions on platforms, but for your infographics, for example, using headings and subheadings will make it it looks really clean and nice, and it's much more readable. And here's, at the end of this presentation, additional resources. These links will be sent out to you, but Miranda, if you'd like to drop them in the chat, you're welcome to. I pulled a lot of the information in this presentation from these resources. I take no credit for much of this. A lot of my information, as I said, comes from both practice and from Googling. And the best resource you have is Google. If you're not sure you're doing something right or you want to learn how to do it, the internet is saturated with ways to improve your accessibility, and it's all just waiting there for you to claim it.